The law office of Morrison and Partners in downtown Seattle felt suffocating on that gray October morning. I sat across from my stepfather, Derek, and his twin sons, Brandon and Connor, watching them count money that wasn't theirs yet. The mahogany conference table between us might as well have been a battlefield. "I'm thinking we start with the lake house," Brandon said, spinning lazily in his leather chair. "Turn it into an Airbnb, make some real money off that waterfront property." Connor nodded enthusiastically. "And the apartment complex in Capitol Hill? That's sitting on prime real estate. We could sell to developers, probably get 8 figures easy." Derek leaned back with the satisfaction of a man who believed he'd already won. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his suit expensive enough to cost more than most people's cars. For the past 4 years, he'd been living off my mother's generosity, and now he thought he'd inherit her 40-year business empire. "Now, boys, let's not get ahead of ourselves," Derek said, though his eyes gleamed with the same greed as his son's. "We need to be respectful during the reading. Your stepmother built something incredible, and we're going to honor her legacy." I almost laughed. The same man who'd systematically isolated my mother from her friends, who'd convinced her to fire longtime employees he deemed disloyal, who'd moved his unemployed adult children into her home and turned it into their personal frat house. This man wanted to talk about honoring her legacy. "Of course, we'll need to make some changes," Derek continued, his voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd grown to hate. "Margaret was brilliant, but she was too sentimental about business. Too many handouts to employees, too many charitable donations. Under proper management, we could triple the portfolio's value." "What about Emma?" Connor asked, jerking his thumb in my direction like I wasn't sitting 3 feet away. "Doesn't she get something?" Derek's laugh was sharp as breaking glass. "Emma was always too busy with her little nonprofit work to pay attention to the family business. Your stepmother saw through that act eventually. Actions have consequences." The truth was, I'd been working at a children's literacy foundation for the past 6 years, ever since graduating college. It didn't pay much, but it was meaningful work, and Mom had always supported my choice. At least, she had until Derek started whispering poison in her ear about how I was using her and taking advantage of her generosity. What none of them knew was that Mom and I had been having secret weekly lunches for the past 2 years, ever since she'd started getting suspicious about Derek's true motives. Ever since she'd hired a private investigator to look into his background and discovered some very interesting facts about his previous marriages. The receptionist appeared at the conference room door. "Miss Morrison will see you now." Sarah Morrison was Mom's attorney and oldest friend, someone who'd watched me grow up and knew exactly what kind of person Derek really was. As we filed into her office, I caught a glimpse of something in her eyes. A barely suppressed smile that reminded me of someone trying not to spoil a surprise. "Please, everyone have a seat," Sarah said, gesturing to the chairs arranged around her desk. "Can I get anyone coffee? Water? This might take a while." "Let's just get this over with," Derek said curtly, settling into what he clearly thought was the power position. "I have a meeting with our estate planner at 4. "Of course," Sarah replied, opening a thick folder on her desk. "First, let me express my condolences on the loss of Margaret Chen Williams. She was not only a client, but a dear friend for over 25 years. "Yes, very tragic," Derek interrupted. "The cancer took her so quickly. But Margaret made her wishes very clear before she passed. The business stays in the family and Emma here." He paused dramatically. "Well, Margaret realized that children don't automatically deserve what their parents worked for. They have to earn it." I felt a familiar stab of pain. The lie Derek had been spreading for months, that Mom had come to her senses about me, that she'd seen through my supposed manipulation and decided to cut me out. He'd been very clever about it, timing his poisonous comments for when I wasn't around, making sure Mom's pain medication left her confused and suggestible. "Interesting perspective," Sarah said dryly. "Shall we begin with the reading of Margaret's last will and testament?" "Please," Derek said. "I believe you'll find everything quite straightforward." That's when Sarah started grinning. Not a polite professional smile, but a full, genuine grin that lit up her entire face. "Mr. Williams," she said, "are you familiar with the concept of an irrevocable trust?" Derek's confident expression flickered. "Of course. It's a financial instrument for estate planning." "Excellent," Sarah said, pulling out another folder. This one's significantly thicker. "Because Margaret established the Chen Williams Family Trust 17 years ago when Emma was 15. The room went very quiet. "So," Derek said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "So," Sarah continued, clearly enjoying herself, "irrevocable trusts can't be changed once they're established. And this particular trust was structured to transfer all business assets to Emma upon either her 32nd birthday or Margaret's death, whichever came first." Brandon's mouth fell open. "That's impossible." "Emma," Sarah said, turning to me, "when did you turn 32? "6 months ago," I said quietly. "Mom threw me a surprise party. Derek was conveniently out of town on business." "Ah, yes," Sarah nodded. The weekend Margaret came to see me to finalize the transfer paperwork. She was quite specific about the timing. Derek's face was turning an alarming shade of red. You can't transfer assets that are part of a marriage estate. I'm her widower. I have rights. Sarah's grin widened. Actually, Mr. Williams, you can't claim rights to assets that legally belong to someone else. The trust transferred Margaret's entire business portfolio to Emma 6 months ago. The restaurant chain, the real estate holdings, the investment accounts, everything. You've been living in Emma's house and spending Emma's money for the past 6 months. The silence in the room was deafening. Connor looked like he was going to be sick. Brandon kept opening and closing his mouth like a fish out of water. How much? Derek whispered. Sarah consulted her papers. The portfolio was valued at approximately $47 million at the time of transfer. With recent acquisitions and market performance, it's currently worth approximately $54 million. I thought Derek might actually faint. The color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug. But the will? He stammered. She updated everything when we got married. She did indeed, Sarah agreed cheerfully. Let me read the relevant portions. To my beloved husband, Derek Williams, I leave the sum of $1 in recognition of the value he brought to our marriage. To Brandon and Connor Williams, I leave the sum of $1 each in appreciation for their contributions to our family. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out 3 crisp $1 bills, placing them on the desk with ceremonial precision. The remainder of my personal effects, Sarah continued reading, including my jewelry collection, family photographs, and personal mementos, I leave to my daughter Emma, who showed me what true love looks like even when I couldn't see it clearly myself. Derek shot to his feet, his chair crashing backward. This is fraud. Margaret wasn't in her right mind. The medication, the cancer treatments, she was confused. Sarah was ready for this. She pulled out a medical file. Margaret underwent a comprehensive cognitive evaluation 4 months ago. Perfect scores across the board. She also had her mental capacity evaluated by 2 independent psychiatrists. She was, and I quote from the report, cogent, rational, and fully aware of her decisions and their implications. But why? Connor asked, looking genuinely bewildered. We took care of her. We were there for her. I finally spoke up. You were there for her money. There's a difference. You can't prove that, Brandon snapped. Actually, I said, reaching into my purse, I can. I pulled out 3 thick envelopes and placed them on the table. Eviction notices. You have 30 days to vacate my properties. All of them. Derek's face went white. You can't evict family. You're not my family, I replied calmly. You're tenants who've been living rent-free in my house. The house, the lake cabin, the downtown condo where Brandon's been staying, they're all mine now, have been for 6 months. Sarah cleared her throat. There is one more item. Margaret left a letter to be read after the will. She handed me an envelope, and I recognized Mom's neat handwriting on the front. For Emma, my brave girl. With hands that were steadier than I felt, I opened the letter and began to read aloud. My dearest Emma, if you're hearing this, then our plan worked perfectly. I'm sorry for the deception, but I needed Derek to show his true colors, and I needed you protected while I did it. Derek's sharp intake of breath cut through the silence. You were right to be worried when I married Derek so quickly after your father's death. Your instincts were always excellent. What you didn't know was that I was already suspicious. The private investigator I hired revealed some very disturbing patterns in Derek's previous relationships. I paused, looking at Derek's ashen face. His 2 previous wives had both died young. Both had changed their wills shortly before their deaths, and both had left everything to Derek. The cancer diagnosis came just weeks after the wedding, I continued reading. When Derek started pushing for me to update my will, I knew you'd been right about him all along. That's when I moved everything into the irrevocable trust and asked you to play along. Play along? Derek's voice cracked. I kept reading. Thank you for pretending to be distant from the business when Derek was around. Thank you for letting him think he'd succeeded in turning me against you. Thank you for trusting me when I asked you to wait, even when it must have been heartbreaking to watch him poison our relationship. The letter continued, and with each word, Derek's world crumbled a little more. To Derek, Brandon, and Connor, I know exactly what you are. The investigators' reports have been forwarded to the Seattle Police Department's Fraud Division. I suggest you use your 30-day notice wisely. Derek collapsed back into his chair like a deflated balloon. There's more, I said, turning the page. Emma, my darling daughter, you are everything I could have hoped for. Strong, compassionate, intelligent, and above all, genuine. You chose meaningful work over money, love over greed. Take care of the fortune I've protected for you, but more importantly, take care of yourself. My voice caught slightly as I read the final lines. Your father would be so proud of the woman you've become. I love you more than all the money in the world. Use what I've left you to make the world a little bit better, just like you always have. All my love, Mom. I folded the letter carefully, aware that everyone in the room was staring at me. There's a P.S., I said quietly. The ring your grandmother left me is in my jewelry box, top drawer. It's yours now, as it always should have been. Sarah broke the silence. Is there anything else, Mr. Williams? Derek looked up at her with hollow eyes. The police report. How much do they know? Everything, Sarah replied matter-of-factly. The financial manipulation, the isolation tactics, the medication confusion, and some very interesting parallels with your previous marriages that they're eager to investigate. Derek turned to me, his face a mask of barely controlled desperation. Emma, please, I loved your mother. This is all a misunderstanding. I stood, gathering my copies of the documents. You loved her money, Derek. Mom figured out the difference. As I reached the door, Derek called out one last time. She was sick, confused. You manipulated a dying woman. I turned back to face him. Mom was a lot of things, Derek, but she was never stupid. She saw you coming from a mile away. She just wanted to make sure you couldn't hurt anyone else the way you hurt your first two wives. I left them there, sitting in stunned silence with their dollar bills, and walked out into the Seattle drizzle. In the parking garage, I sat in my car, bought with my money from my trust, and let out a breath I'd been holding for 6 months. My phone rang. It was Janet, Mom's longtime assistant at the restaurant company, one of the few employees Derek hadn't managed to get fired. How did it go? She asked. Exactly like Mom predicted, I said, right down to Derek threatening to contest everything. She'd be so proud, Janet said softly. She talked about you constantly those last few weeks, said you were the only person who loved her for who she was, not what she had. I miss her, I admitted, surprising myself with how much emotion was in my voice. I know, honey, but she made sure you'd be okay. That's all she cared about in the end, making sure Derek couldn't destroy what she'd built, and making sure you had the resources to do good in the world. After we hung up, I drove to Sunset Hills Cemetery. Mom's grave was covered in fresh flowers, roses from her garden, which I'd been maintaining in secret, and lilies from her employees at the restaurants. We did it, Mom, I whispered to the headstone. Just like you planned. The rain had stopped, and weak afternoon sunlight filtered through the clouds. For a moment, I could almost hear her laugh, the one she'd had when we'd sat in Sarah's office 6 months ago, signing papers while Derek was conveniently away on a business trip. He thinks he's so clever, she'd said then, her voice weak from chemo, but her eyes still bright with intelligence. But there's a difference between being clever and being smart, Emma. You're smart. You understand that love isn't about what you can get from someone. It's about what you're willing to give. I placed a single white rose on her grave, her favorite, and headed home, not to the waterfront mansion where Derek was probably frantically packing, but to the small apartment I'd been renting in Capitol Hill, letting them think I was struggling financially while the trust accumulated wealth. Mom was right. Clever and smart weren't the same thing at all. 2 weeks later, I stood in the doorway of the family mansion as Derek's moving truck pulled away. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, as if years of tension and manipulation had been physically lifted from the walls. In Mom's study, I found Grandma's ring exactly where she'd said it would be. The sapphire caught the afternoon light, the same blue as Mom's eyes, the same blue as mine. As I slipped it onto my finger, I thought about all the women in my family who'd worn it, strong women who'd built businesses, raised families, and left the world a little better than they found it. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. The police want to meet with you next week. They found some very interesting connections between Derek and his previous wives' deaths. Apparently, you and your mother weren't the only ones who got suspicious. I smiled, understanding Mom's final gift. This wasn't just about protecting our family's fortune. It was about protecting other families from Derek's predatory behavior. Outside, I could see Mom's garden, which Derek had let go to seed, claiming maintenance was too expensive. But I'd been paying the gardener in secret all these months, keeping it alive just like Mom had kept me safe. As I walked through the roses, I thought about the foundation I'd establish, the resources I'd put toward helping other families recognize and escape financial manipulation. About the scholarship fund I'd create for kids from low-income families who wanted to pursue meaningful work instead of just chasing money. Derek had been partially right about one thing. Mom had made her wishes very clear. But her true wish wasn't about punishing him. It was about making sure love triumphed over greed, that family meant more than just shared DNA, and that justice, however delayed, would always find its way home. I pulled out my phone and called Sarah. I want to establish that foundation we talked about. Mom always said the best revenge was living well, but I think she'd approve of this kind of justice too. Through the window of Mom's study, I could see her favorite reading chair, the one where she'd sit going over business reports while I did homework at her feet. Derek had tried to sell it, claiming it was outdated, but I'd secretly bought it from the dealer and stored it until now. Some things were worth preserving exactly as they were. The sun was setting over Elliott Bay, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Somewhere, Derek was probably plotting his next move, looking for his next vulnerable target. But it didn't matter anymore. Mom had taught me the most important lesson of all. True wealth wasn't measured in dollars and cents, but in the people who loved you enough to fight for you, even from beyond the grave. The restaurant company was thriving under Janet's management. The real estate portfolio was solid, and the investment accounts were growing steadily. But more than that, I had something Derek would never understand. A legacy built on love, not fear. A fortune earned through decades of hard work and ethical business practices, not manipulation and deceit. I thought about calling the Literacy Foundation in the morning, telling them I'd be making a substantial donation. About the employees at Mom's restaurants who'd be getting bonuses this year because they'd remained loyal when Derek tried to turn her against them. About all the good that could be done with money that had been protected and preserved instead of stolen and squandered. Derek had gotten his inheritance after all, exactly what he deserved. $1 and the knowledge that his greed had finally caught up with him. As for me, I'd gotten something far more valuable. The knowledge that I'd been raised by a woman smart enough to see through deception, strong enough to fight back, and loving enough to make sure her daughter would be safe long after she was gone. The house settled around me with familiar creaks and sighs, welcoming me home. Tomorrow I'd start the real work, not just managing Mom's business empire, but building something even better. A legacy that would help others, protect the vulnerable, and prove that sometimes when you're patient enough and smart enough, good really does triumph over evil. Outside, the first stars were appearing over Seattle's skyline. Mom used to say that stars were just distant suns, lighting the way for travelers in the dark. Tonight, surrounded by everything she'd protected for me, I finally understood what she meant. The light would always find a way to shine through, no matter how dark things seemed. And love, real love, was stronger than any amount of greed or manipulation. Derek had taught me what I didn't want to become. Mom had shown me who I already was. That made all the difference in the world. Update. 6 months later. A lot of people have been asking for an update, so here goes. The past 6 months have been a whirlwind, but mostly in good ways. First, the legal stuff. Derek, Brandon, and Connor are all facing charges. The police investigation revealed that Derek had been systematically drugging Mom with extra pain medication to keep her confused and compliant. They found evidence in her medical records of unexplained dosage increases that Derek had been administering. Even worse, the investigation into his previous wives revealed a disturbing pattern. His first wife, Patricia, died of an accidental medication overdose just 6 months after changing her will. His second wife, Linda, died in a suspicious fall down the stairs after transferring her assets to Derek. The DA is now looking at both cases as potential homicides. Derek tried to flee to Mexico but was arrested at the border. Brandon and Connor were charged as accessories after the fact. Apparently they knew about the medication tampering and helped cover it up. Brandon's gambling debts were even worse than we thought. He owed over $300,000 to some very unsavory people, and Derek had been paying them off with Mom's money. Connor had been running up massive credit card bills and charging everything to Mom's accounts, including a $75,000 sports car he'd hidden in a storage unit. The restraining order worked perfectly. Derek tried to contact me through a mutual acquaintance, begging me to drop the charges. I forwarded the message to the police, which violated his bail conditions and landed him back in jail. Now for the better news. The foundation I established, the Margaret Chen Williams Foundation for Elder Protection, is already making a difference. We've helped 12 families recognize and escape financial elder abuse, and we're working with lawmakers to strengthen protection laws. Sarah Morris serves on the board, along with 3 other attorneys who specialize in elder law. The Literacy Foundation, where I used to work, I made a $2 million donation, enough to fund their programs for the next 10 years. They've named a new reading center after Mom, and I still volunteer there every Saturday morning. Mom's restaurant chain is thriving. Janet officially became CEO, and we've opened 2 new locations. All of Mom's original employees got substantial bonuses and profit-sharing agreements. The employee who'd been with Mom the longest, Carlos, broke down crying when I told him he'd never have to worry about retirement. Derek had been planning to fire him for being too expensive. I kept the main house after all, but completely renovated it. Gone are Derek's cold, modern changes. I restored it to how it looked when Mom and Dad were happy together. Mom's rose garden is more beautiful than ever. I hired a full-time gardener who shares her passion for heirloom varieties. The lake house became a retreat center for families dealing with elder abuse. The mountain cabin is where I go when I need to think and write. Yes, I'm writing a book about this experience. Several publishers are interested. I also found love in an unexpected place. Remember Janet, Mom's assistant? Her brother Michael is a social worker who specializes in elder abuse cases. We met when he came to volunteer at the foundation. He's kind, funny, and completely unimpressed by my money. Our first date was at a food truck, and he insisted on paying. Mom would have adored him. The strangest part? I'm genuinely happy Derek exists. Not because I forgive him. I don't. But because he taught me that wealth without character is meaningless, that love can't be bought or manipulated, and that sometimes the worst people in your life show you exactly who you want to become. Mom's ring sits on my finger as I type this, catching the morning light streaming through the windows of her study. In a few hours, I'm meeting with another family whose patriarch married a much younger woman who's suddenly very interested in changing his will. Thanks to Mom's foresight and courage, I have the resources to help them before it's too late. Derek thought he was so clever, but he made one crucial mistake. He assumed that because Mom loved him, she was weak. He never understood that the strongest people are often the ones who love deeply enough to fight back when that love is betrayed. 3 more things before I sign off. First, I found Mom's journals. She'd been documenting Derek's behavior for over a year before she died. Every cruel comment, every manipulation, every time he forgot to give her medication or gave her too much. She was building a case against him while pretending to be the confused, grieving widow he thought he was controlling. Mom was playing chess while Derek was playing checkers. Second, the private investigator's report revealed something that still gives me chills. Derek had been researching wealthy widows online for months before Dad died. He'd created fake dating profiles and had been corresponding with at least 6 other women, all wealthy, all recently widowed. Mom wasn't his first target after Linda. She was just the one who caught on. Third, and most importantly, I learned that Mom had been secretly funding scholarships for underprivileged kids for 15 years. Derek never knew about it because she used a different bank account. When I discovered the program, I found letters from dozens of students thanking her for changing their lives. One young woman wrote, "Because of your scholarship, I'm the first person in my family to graduate college. I'm now a teacher, helping other kids who come from nothing, just like you helped me." That's when I knew exactly what Mom's true legacy was supposed to be. So to Derek, if you're reading this from whatever prison cell you're in, you failed. Spectacularly. You thought you could manipulate a woman who built a multi-million-dollar empire from nothing. You thought you could outsmart someone who saw through your pathetic games from day one. You thought you could steal 40 years of hard work and genuine love. Instead, you ended up with exactly what you deserved. Nothing. Well, not quite nothing. You do have that dollar bill. I hope it was worth it. As for everyone asking if I ever feel guilty about the deception, absolutely not. Mom and I didn't deceive Derek. We gave him exactly what he asked for, the chance to show his true character. He could have chosen to genuinely care for a dying woman. He could have chosen to honor her memory and treat her daughter with kindness. He could have chosen love over greed. He didn't. Every choice he made was his own. Every cruel word, every manipulation, every plan to steal what wasn't his, those were his decisions. Mom and I just made sure there were consequences. The house feels peaceful now. I can almost hear Mom's laughter echoing through the halls, especially in the evenings when the light hits the garden just right. Sometimes I'll find a white rose on my pillow or catch a whiff of her perfume in empty rooms. I don't believe in ghosts, but I do believe in love that transcends death. Derek tried to destroy that love. Instead, he made it stronger. That's the real inheritance Mom left me. Not the money, not the businesses, not the properties. She left me the knowledge that love always wins in the end, even when it takes a little longer than we'd like. And sometimes, justice is worth the wait. Final update, because people keep asking. Derek was sentenced to 25 years to life for the murder of his first wife, Patricia. The medication evidence was overwhelming. He pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty. Brandon got 8 years for financial fraud, and Connor got 6 years for the same. They'll all be old men when they get out, if they ever do. I married Michael last month. Small ceremony in Mom's garden, surrounded by people who knew what real love looked like. Sarah Morrison officiated. She got ordained online just for us. Janet was my maid of honor. Carlos walked me down the aisle because Dad couldn't be there. But Mom's memory was everywhere. The Margaret Chen Williams Foundation has now helped over 200 families and has expanded to 6 states. We're working on federal legislation to make financial elder abuse a federal crime with mandatory minimum sentences. But the best part? Last week, I found out I'm pregnant. Mom always said she wanted grandchildren, but never pressured me about it. Now I wish she could meet this little one, but I'll make sure they know all about their grandmother who was smart enough to protect their future before they were even conceived. The baby's middle name will be Margaret. If it's a boy, Michael Margaret. If it's a girl, Emma Margaret. Because some names deserve to be carried forward. And some legacies are worth preserving exactly as they are. Derek thought he could erase Mom's impact on the world. Instead, her influence is just beginning. Every family we help, every scholarship we fund, every young person who learns that love matters more than money, that's Mom's real inheritance. And it's going to last a lot longer than Derek's pathetic schemes ever could. Love wins. It just sometimes takes a little strategy. Thanks for reading, Reddit. You've been with me through this whole journey, and I can't tell you how much your support has meant. Take care of each other out there, and remember, if something feels wrong, trust your instincts. They're usually right. Edit. Thank you for the gold, kind strangers. I'm donating the equivalent amount to the National Center on Elder Abuse. Keep fighting the good fight. Edit 2. For those asking about the book, The Inheritance Trap, How My Mother Outsmarted a Predator, will be published by HarperCollins next fall. All proceeds will go to the foundation. Derek won't get a penny, but every family we help will be part of Mom's continuing legacy. Edit 3. Someone asked if I ever feel sad about the money and success Derek will never have. Honestly, no. Derek was never going to be successful or happy, no matter how much money he stole. People like him are empty inside. They mistake taking from others for achieving something. Real success, real happiness, comes from giving, from building, from loving. Derek was incapable of all three. The money he wanted so badly? It's doing more good in 1 month than Derek accomplished in his entire worthless life. Mom knew exactly what she was doing when she protected it from him. As for Derek himself, he's exactly where he belongs. Sometimes the universe has perfect timing. Final edit, I promise. A lot of people have private messaged me about their own situations with predatory family members or financial abusers. If you're in a similar situation, please reach out to your local elder abuse hotline or visit our foundation website. You're not alone, and there is help available. Don't wait until it's too late. And remember what Mom taught me. The difference between being clever and being smart is that clever people think they can outsmart everyone else. Smart people know that the best strategy is simply to be genuinely good to the people you love. Everything else takes care of itself. Love you, Mom. Mission accomplished.